What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Holy Cow. X actually made me think critically about something. As always, I'm your host, Zach Cronin, and normally, how my experience goes on the app formerly known as Twitter goes like this. I open it, I see a take, I think, wow, what a disastrous thing to say. I then continue to sit with it, I digest it, I process, and usually come back to my original thought. Wow, what a disastrous take. Recently, however, I saw a question posited that really made me think, and I felt that it was a legitimately good question and an interesting discussion to have, and that was, is DeMar DeRozan a Hall of Fame caliber NBA player? This conversation started because of a piece for The Athletic by Mike Vorkunov. Unfortunately, the piece is paywalled, so I can't give my thoughts on its entire contents, but the piece that was floating around social media said this: DeRozan now sits at 39th on the NBA's all-time scoring list, right behind Chris Paul and Steph Curry. Everyone in the top 47 in scoring has or will make the Hall. Some of you that are watching this right now are probably about to pee your pants from laughing so hard, which is the common reaction when the Hall of Fame is mentioned around a player who isn't a first ballot lock. I personally wouldn't vote for DeMar DeRozan, but I can't emphatically say no, he won't ever make it in, because I do think there is a scenario in which DeMar DeRozan gets inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame. Time of this video, DeRozan is gearing up for his 15th NBA season, and he's constructed quite the respectable career. He's a six-time All-Star, a three-time All-NBA guy, has career averages of 21 points, 4 rebounds, and 4 assists. His most notable achievement is probably helping bring the Toronto Raptors back to relevance. He has undeniably been a very good, dare I say, great NBA player, but his case personally isn't strong enough. I don't entirely rule out DeMar making the Hall, because his resume, regardless of how impressed or not you are by it, has proven to be Hall of Fame worthy. There are guys in Springfield right now with careers on par with DeMar's. Adrian Dantley, for example. Dantley was a six-time All-Star who only twice made All-NBA. The big difference between DeMar and Dantley, however, is that during the early 80s, Dantley was one of the NBA's premier scorers. He had 4 consecutive seasons averaging more than 30 points per night, 2 of which were enough to lead the league. Also, his cumulative scoring average from 1980 to 1986 was 29.6, and he also shot 56% from the field during that stretch. Because of Dantley's dominance during the early 80s, and also because he is one of the most prolific scorers of his time, I feel a more apt comparison to DeRozan is Mitch Richmond. Outside of a few more All-NBA selections, Richmond's only clear advantage in the accolades department is the Rookie of the Year award that he won. He did also win a title in 2002, but I'm not going to count that because he didn't really contribute to that Lakers team. I think the biggest thing working against DeMar DeRozan in his Hall of Fame case is something that's entirely out of his hands, and it's the NBA and basketball in general being too talented now. Up until like 10 years ago, maybe, if your career was a 7 out of 10, you'd more than likely earn a spot in Springfield, because the NBA has historically been very liberal with their enshrinements. That threshold, however, is rapidly going up. What used to be a 7 is now a 7.5. It'll be a 7.7, and so on. We're rapidly approaching a point where the NBA is so talented that guys like DeMar, who were very good during their time, won't comparatively be good enough. Really quick, just to further illustrate the explosion in talent in the backcourt and on the wings, we're going to look at the highest scoring guards from 1991 to 1999 in terms of points per game. Mitch Richmond is third behind Michael Jordan and Allen Iverson. If we do the same for DeMar, he's around 13 or 14. Side note, I don't know why Basketball Reference included Mikal Bridges in this table for this one season that he had, but I'm not going to be considering him and therefore bumping DeMar up a spot. It's just, again, further illustrates the explosion in talent that the NBA has seen. And again, how guys like DeMar, who have been very good for a decade and a half, just don't have, they just don't have enough. I also do understand that it may be a tad superficial to only look at scoring when considering someone's admittance into the Hall of Fame, but in DeMar's case, he is a scorer. He's a solid rebounder and a much improved facilitator, particularly during the years he spent with San Antonio. But when we remember DeMar DeRozan and we talk about some of the better players of the 2010s, he's going to be remembered for scoring. He's going to be remembered for being a die-hard mid-range addict who reluctantly expanded his game to the three-point line, even though the three ball became more and more popular and more involved in NBA teams' game plans. Just to go back to earlier for a little bit, and this is definitely going to make me sound like a little bit of a hater, and I really don't want it to come off this way. The one thing that I can't get over with DeMar DeRozan is that he just has consistently not been among the elites at his position. When you think of Hall of Famers, you think of guys who dominated the NBA for extended periods of time. And I do not see that with DeMar DeRozan. There were a couple of years when he had impressive campaigns and he was S tier. He averaged 27 a night a couple of times. That was when DeMar DeRozan was at his peak. But it's been very difficult for him to replicate that as he's bounced from franchise to franchise. I don't want anyone to think that I think it's because he's a bad player. It is mostly circumstantial and almost the epitome of being born in the wrong generation. There is no doubt in my mind that if DeMar had played like during the late 90s or even the mid 90s and, the early aughts, he would undeniably have been one of the best players in the league. There is, of course, also the fact that he has 0 rings. I do not hold that against him. That is the point that every sports talk Andy latches onto. And I think it's just really a disingenuous way to have a conversation about a player because so many of the people who default to rings fail to acknowledge the fact that winning a championship in any sport is a team effort. There are many ingredients that someone needs to construct a championship level team, and there are many outside of the performances of your best player. It doesn't matter how great DeMar could have played with Chicago or Toronto if he or any other elite player doesn't have the right supporting cast, does not have the right system, does not have the right coach. They're going to fail. We've seen this with LeBron. We saw this with Jordan in the early 80s. There's so much more that goes into a championship level team, and I don't want to hold that against a player. I don't think that a player's inability to win a championship should be the one thing that we look at under the largest microscope when analyzing their potential entry into the Hall of Fame. A more valid criticism of DeMar in regards to his postseason appearances is that his play historically in the playoffs has not lived up to his play in the regular season for whatever reason. He just has not been that guy. That is just a far better argument to hold because that is something that is attached to the individual player. I think the long-winded version of what I'm trying to say is that the induction into the Basketball Hall of Fame is an individual award, much like winning an MVP, for example. Although a player winning the MVP should be on a respectable team, it is more about the player's performance on the basketball court. Inducting someone into the Hall of Fame should look at their performances on the basketball court. Even though I think DeMar is a very solid player, I don't think that as of right now, at the time of this recording, his case is strong enough. Things could be different 3-4 years down the line. But the TLDR of this whole video is that DeMar DeRozan is a very good player who I personally wouldn't vote into the Hall of Fame, but I do think there is a path into which he makes it to Springfield. And with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and close this video out. Thank you guys so very much for coming to hang out with me today. As always, everything I'm associated with is down in the description box below. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Subscribe to this channel. Leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it. Leave a comment as well. It really helps out with the algorithm. And with that, I'll catch y'all in the next one.